Newsfirst, Newsline.
Hello there, a very good evening and welcome to another edition of Newsline. This time last year, Sri Lanka was in a very, very different place. We barely had any power, we didn't have gas, we didn't have fuel. A lot of people in Sri Lanka didn't have food to eat. But this time around, it seems as if though the storm has passed. But has the storm really passed? Sri Lanka is on an IMF program, but then again, we've been on 16 programs. How many of them have been successful? Even when the report initially came out right after Sri Lanka got on this IMF program, there was skepticism over how successful this program will be, or will Sri Lanka be able to complete this program? There are certain reviews taking place every month with regard to the conditions that have to be met by Sri Lanka to fulfill this IMF program or to be on track with this program. And to discuss these matters and more, we've got with us today Sureni Weerathunge. She is a senior research analyst at Verite Research. A very good evening, Sureni, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Shalan.
Sureni, let's start from where Sri Lanka stands right now. Now, the IMF agreement is, of course, very, very complicated. I myself tried to go through that a bit, but I'm not as financially literate as you to maybe understand all of those provisions. So let's start off with, are we ticking all the boxes right now? At this point in time, Sri Lanka has to fulfill or have had to fulfill certain commitments. Are we on track?
Thank you very much for having me, Shalan, on board. And let me quickly give you like a brief background, right? So as you said, we were on 16 programs and we've only completed 9 and we're on our 17th program. And if you look at from 1965 to now, 50% of the time we were on programs. However, we also had certain concerns as to whether we will succeed this time or not, whether we will fail this time as well. But I mean, by looking at the tracker, I will come to that point later, we're doing pretty good. And we've made sufficient progress as well. However, there's of course more room to progress, and of course we can talk during our program. So far, by May, we have completed 29 commitments out of 100 commitments we've made with the IMF. And in addition to that 29 commitments, we've failed when it comes to 3 commitments. Briefly, if I'm to list the 3, the new Central Bank Act was supposed to obtain the parliamentary approval, and that has not been ticked yet. And in April, we should have technically increased the betting and gaming levy. We haven't done that yet. And on top of that, the first quarter, or like by May, sorry, not by March 2023, we would have earned a tax revenue of 650 billion.
We should have.
We should have. But recently, the Ministry of Finance actually released their report, and according to that report, we've only achieved 578 billion tax revenue. So we are falling short there, 72 billion. Therefore, there are concerns, of course, and when it comes to 6 proposals, we don't know the progress. But the good thing is, it was 10% last month. It has come down. So, okay, there's progress, and there's one partially met one, which we can, of course, talk next.
Right. So, Sureni, now when we speak of these commitments are vital to Sri Lanka getting the next tranche. Now, although initially we said, we are getting $2.9 billion from the IMF, that doesn't mean we get it lock, stock and barrel. It comes in tranches. It comes only if Sri Lanka meets these commitments. Now, the next tranche is due somewhere around September, correct me if I'm wrong. So, by that time, if there are, I believe there are several commitments. I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say if there are about 100 commitments that should be met by the month of September, and Sri Lanka has not met maybe a few, say 5, maybe 10. Does that mean that Sri Lanka will not be getting this tranche, or will this tranche get delayed, or could there be several, concessions that Sri Lanka could receive? as far as the next tranche is concerned?
Let me put it this way, Shalan. So if you look at the whole, we are on a 4 years program, right? During the 4 years, we have to complete 100 commitments in total. However, some of these commitments are not like a one time, you're done and dusted, you tick it off, you don't have to do anything after that. It's not like that. There are certain commitments that constantly, it could be semi-annually, quarterly or monthly, you have to do changes. As an example, the fuel price, the electricity pricing, like every 6 months or quarterly, you have to do these changes to pricing formulas, so it covers the cost of generation. And when it comes to the first tranche, it's actually due in September, as you said. By the time, we should tick 71 commitments out of 100 commitments.
So the entire 4-year program has 100 commitments. We need to tick off 71 by September.
Yes. As I said, certain commitments in that 71 are ongoing. So every now and then you have to revisit, you have to review, you have to make changes. But yes, as I said, by 71 should be completed by September 2023. And then the government and the IMF representatives will sit together, and we will have to show what we have ticked off, what we have not ticked off. Definitely, let's say I go to a bank and trying to get a loan, and they also look at what I have ticked when it comes to giving me the second tranche. Similarly, here as well, they will see what I have ticked and what Sri Lanka has not ticked. And you will be definitely penalized for what you have not ticked. The penalization will be decided when they actually sit and have that proper review in September. Yeah, and in September, upon a successful review, we will receive another $333 billion in dollars.
Million, you mean?
Billion, yes. Sorry, a million, my bad. It's $333 billion.
I got excited there for a second.
No, the total is actually also 2.9 billion.
Exactly my point.
Yes, so we will receive $333 million upon a successful review. And then again by December, we have to complete 88 commitments.
So Verite Research has been doing quite a lot of work in keeping, tabs on the government, what the government is doing, what the government's plans are. Now, along with this IMF program that we're on, there is also another process that is ongoing simultaneously, and that is the debt restructuring process. Now, if I remember correctly, the IMF in their statement said that they will have nothing to do with the debt restructuring process. That is for the government of Sri Lanka to discuss with its creditors, how they're going to do the local debt restructuring, and all that's up to the government. So my question to you is, as far as the IMF program is concerned, how does the debt restructuring really feature in the program? Does it have an effect on the program? Does it have no effect on the program? Is it something in the middle?
So why we are here in the first place is because of the debt crisis. We default debt service payments back in 2022, early 2022, and that is what actually led to us to where we are. So of course, debt restructuring is vital. On top of that, there's a lot of lack of clarity and lack of transparency right now when it comes to debt restructuring. Even to us as professionals, we cannot actually say what will happen because of this lack of transparency. Therefore, I will not go into something that I don't know, but rather I will say what will happen if we do not succeed in debt restructuring. To give you like a quick picture, usually a country should restructure. Every country, when entering into a program, if they have like a debt restructuring component, they set a target as to how much they have to restructure. Similarly, we also have that target as to how much we need to restructure. Whenever we can't restructure that expected amount externally, we have to restructure internally. So in a way that it's sustainable, of course. Just to add to that point, sustainability is very, very important. The debt restructuring should be deep and sustainable. So if you look at past research, we've realized that since 1975, we did a study as to see how now, like few countries who have entered into debt restructuring, how they have performed. And we realized that 41% of countries have succeeded in the first go. They've done their debt restructuring and had come over the debt crisis. However, 59%, more than the majority, had to go for multiple debt restructuring processes. So that's the risk that we see for Sri Lanka. The thing is, if we don't do a sustainable debt restructuring, rather a shallow one, if we do a shallow restructuring, then there's a risk of us driving to another crisis down the line. So we have to make sure our debt restructuring, we have to expedite the process, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're doing a sustainable and a deep restructuring.
So Sureni, when you say that we might hit a crisis again somewhere down the line, maybe 5 years from now, is it going to be similar to the crisis that we experienced maybe last year?
So the thing is, I won't say we will definitely go into a crisis.
When you say we could.
We could if we do not take necessary steps, Shalan. So it's not only about taking these 100 commitments. It's about restructuring, and most importantly, even after the debt restructuring, we have to take steps to fix the systemic reforms. We have a huge governance crisis. If we, let's say, smoothly moves and tick all the boxes, do a perfect restructuring, and still if we don't fix that corruption in the system, then there's still a risk of we're running down to the same spot, and it will end up in another crisis, which could be similar, which could be worse. It depends on how we actually act right now.
So really, let's speak about something that people are quite excited about these days, and that's the appreciation of the rupee. There are different views that are being expressed, especially on social media. A lot of these views, of course, by non-professionals who maybe see the short-term gains in all of this. There were also certain questions raised as to why, when the rupee is appreciating so much, that the prices of imported items such as milk powder and so on and so forth don't really quite reduce. So people seem to be excited about the appreciation of the rupee. However, just a few days ago, I believe it depreciated quite significantly again, coming back to the situation that was maybe 2-3 months ago. So as far as the appreciation and depreciation of the rupee in relation to the US dollar goes, how much do you think the people should be concerned about this, or take that into account when they eventually judge how Sri Lanka is moving forward right now?
Let me put it this way, Shalan. This is actually my personal view, because there's no research to support this right now, right? Why rupee was appreciating? Because we were in a contracted economy for last couple of months, right? We were not engaging our normal potential export activities, our normal potential import activities. We were holding our economy very tight so that it moves smoothly. We had import restrictions on many products, right? And we were receiving dollars as worker remittance, as grants, as loans and stuff. But we were not actually making dollar payments as usual in the form of, let's say, import payments, right?
Or even loan repayments, interest repayments.
Exactly. We were receiving dollars, but we were not paying, or rather the outflow was not as usual, right? So basically, the price of anything depends on its demand and supply, right? So when the supply is high and the demand is low, usually the price drops, right? That could be one reason why the rupee appreciated. But if you noticed, as soon as we kind of removed the import bans and reduced the restrictions, dollars started to flow out, and now the rupee is again slowly depreciating. So that is the whole picture I personally see.
So as far as judging the progress of the economy of Sri Lanka goes based on the exchange rate, do you think it's wise?
No, it's not, because artificially you can, this is something you can artificially manipulate. So it's not wise to judge how the economy is doing based on the dollar exchange rate. definitely it's not a good indicator.
But we get very responsible ministers of the government even coming out and saying, look, our economy is doing well. The exchange rate, look at the exchange rate, look at how the rupee is appreciating, we're doing really well. So you don't think that's an informed opinion?
I would rather say to the general public, look at the inflation rates, look at the policy rates, look at how the reforms are done, look at how the economy is, look at how Sri Lanka has gained the market confidence, rather looking at the exchange rate.
So that's a very narrow hole to look through to judge the economy.
Yes.
Sureni, we need to cross over to a short commercial break, but just before we go, I don't know if you would quite be open to comment on this, but recently there were allegations leveled by the Samagi Janabalawegaya that there was some sort of malpractice in the issuance of bonds. I mean, Sri Lanka is not new to this kind of situation because we've had the central bank bond scam, that the bonds were issued just before the interest rates were brought down. Any comment on that? Any understanding
unfortunately, I also saw the news yesterday.
Okay.
So I don't have an opinion yet. But yeah, I haven't seen anything about it or heard. But I also saw the news and I also found quite interesting. So I wanted to research about it. But yes, I haven't looked at it yet.
You hadn't had time.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe some other time. Okay.
Yes,
We'll cross over to a
definitely.
short commercial break and return with more on Newsline. Stay tuned.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Sri Lanka dumps Indian-made anesthetics after deaths in hospitals. Amarikirti Athakorala murder case examination begins. 37 people indicted. Attempts being made to pass the proposed legislation on broadcast regulation. Arrest warrant issued for Vimal Veerathunge, who failed to appear in court. Indian naval submarine Vajir, the latest indigenous Kalvari-class submarine of the Indian Navy at the Colombo port. Sri Lanka records a resounding 175-run win over UAE in their first ICC Cricket World Cup qualifier in Bulawayo.
සංචාරක හා හෝටල් ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ දෙස් විදෙස් රැකියා අපේක්ෂාවෙන් සිටින ඔබ වෙනුවෙන් MIM වෙතින් නවතම පාඨමාලා දෙකක්.
Certificate course in food and beverage, certificate course in kitchen.
මෙරට ප්‍රමුඛ පෙළේ හෝටල් තුළ ප්‍රායෝගික පුහුණුව සමග සුපවේදය පිළිබඳ ඔබේ කුසලතා ඔප්නංවා ගැනීමට අවස්ථාව.
Call 076-8822-707 now. Register via www.mim.lk. MIM Fox Faculty.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Hello there, welcome back. You're watching Newsline. We're in discussion with Sureni Weerathunge, Senior Research Analyst at Verite Research. Sureni, just before the break, we were speaking about how Sri Lanka is faring as far as the IMF program is concerned. Sureni, now, as you said, Sri Lanka is doing all right for the moment. We have 71 commitments to meet before our deadline in September. Before the review happens, before the IMF decides whether or not we are going to receive the next tranche. But always there is a possibility that we might not be able to complete all of these commitments. So my question to you is, Sureni, not receiving the next tranche from the IMF on the scheduled date in September, how detrimental is it to Sri Lanka?
It will definitely have detrimental impacts, because if you can see now, after IMF agreement happened, we received funds from ADB and World Bank and many even bilateral partners. We will not be able to tap into bilateral creditors or debts rather anytime soon, of course. But since we've entered into the IMF program, we have received funds, we have received grants, we have received the help that we didn't receive during that short period, or rather felt like a long period.
When
right?
we didn't have any gas, electricity, all of that.
Yes. So what I would suggest is, this time we should really make sure that we go above and beyond to meet the targets and perfectly clean sweep all our targets. The thing is, Shalan, if you look at I said, like, for last 54 years, 50% of the time, we were on IMF programs. But if you look at the primary deficit targets, the revenue targets, the expenditure targets, we've never met our targets. If you look at last 20 years, we've never met our revenue targets that we set, we in the sense the government set it for self. So forget about IMF coming and penalizing us. Just, we have to kind of self-evaluate and self-control and come out of this crisis. IMF is just a ladder for us to come out of the crisis. But if we want to stay up there, then we have to take steps. And those needs to be self-corrections. Right? And definitely, if we are unable to secure the second tranche, this is going to be recorded as the 10th not the 10th, but the 8th failed program. And it will definitely have detrimental impacts, because the rest of the international organizations and even bilateral partners will not be there to help us. Plus, the debt restructuring will not also succeed if IMF steps out. So we have to make sure we succeed this time. And it's crucial for us.
Sureni, in your view, what do you think is the biggest challenge that Sri Lanka faces in achieving these 71 conditions, the 71 goals that have been included in the IMF program? What's the biggest challenge?
Right now, the biggest challenge is, let me kind of categorize it, right? The first challenge is the governance crisis. The second one is lack of analysis, lack of published analysis, and lack of transparency. Let me quickly bring like 3 examples to explain why this is a problem. Shalan, when we first entered into the IMF program, or when we rather trying to enter or secure this IMF program, we had 9 key prior actions to take to receive that executive board level agreement. And during that period, right, of course we were struggling as a country, yet the government actually proactively took measures to increase the government revenue. And we secured the staff level agreement in September. But soon after, in October, a huge company actually got a 12-year tax holidays, that was including corporate income taxes and VAT. Right? But why this is the optimal decision or the ideal decision to make? We are trying to raise our revenue. We're trying to raise a proper good tax revenue. And why we're giving huge companies like 12-year tax holidays will have, of course, I mean, it will be felt. The impact is definitely felt on the economy. So why we do this? Why it's the optimal decision to make? Why scraping of general public is okay over giving very generous, extremely generous benefits to companies? And the second thing is the cigarette indexation. It's not Verite. It's not only Verite Research, Shalan. Many other research organizations such as IPS and even universities actually have done and published research saying that we have to build a formula to define cigarette pricing. But the government has not yet taken that steps. If you look at the World Health Organization, 75% of the price of a stick, or like a cigarette stick, should be tax. But in Sri Lanka, as of the last research, it is only 69%.
What's the rest?
It's basically the profit to the company. So if let's say if your price of a stick is 100, 75% technically should be a tax, and the 25 is the profit, or like rather what goes
the
to
income.
Yeah, and in Sri Lanka, the 75% is not there. We only tax 69% of the stick. So
but it's only 6%. Is that huge?
It is. So I'll quickly bring you bring numbers to the table. So government expects to raise 137 billion rupees this year only from cigarette or tobacco, right? And for that, they raised the excise duty on tobacco and alcohol by 20% in January. And we did the analysis, we did the math internally, and according to our analysis, with the 20% increase, government can only raise 92 billion by end of this year. And in June, the government, according to the IMF program, government should review and accordingly increase the tobacco and alcohol tax excise duty, right? Let's say
In June?
In June, this month.
This month, okay.
Right. So let's say the government takes steps to increase the excise by another 20%, Shalan. Then, during the coming 6 months, the government can only raise 7 billion rupees. Even after that, then the government can only earn 99 billion by the end of this year, where they expect to earn 137 billion. So we are falling short. And our math actually shows if the government is to earn 137 billion revenue only from tobacco tax, right? The government should have actually increased the tax rate by 147%.
Not 20%.
Exactly. So the problem is this lack of analysis is actually giving wrong numbers, and then at the end of the year, right, we're falling short of the revenue.
But then, Sureni, since you spoke about the tobacco tax, have you taken into account the fact that once you raise prices significantly by, you said, 147%, there's going to be a significant population who will no longer be able to afford that, whatever, the cigarette stick.
So,
and what will happen is they will switch to alternatives that are less pricey and that are maybe could be out of the government's tax net.
Yes.
So are all of these taken into consideration when you say?
I would say the market structure has been taken into account, right? But of course, this is a habitual product, Shalan, right? Most of the time they don't change, and there is a community in the society, of course, who actually switch to rather like products like, of course, as you said, the products that are not kind of monitored by the government. But if you've noticed in the budget itself, right, in the budget speech, the government said they're going to increase the tax on BD stick. Per stick, it is going to increase by 2 rupees. So my question is, right, the government has an estimate in the budget estimates. So where's the analysis? This is something that is very hard to track. Right?
Because the industry is so all over the place.
It's all over the place, and they don't file for taxes. They are not functioning in the proper formal setup. So our problem is how the government actually did the analysis. So again, the problem of lack of analysis comes into play, Shalan, and we're actually doing this BD note, which will go sometime soon, which actually talks about how, like, the potential revenue or the potential BD sticks that are being sold in the market. So,
Sureni, I think we went on a little bit of a tangent there. My question to you previously was, what is the biggest challenge? We have only 2 minutes left in the program.
Oh, no
so if
problem.
you can really scrooge it in.
Sure. The third one I was going to tell about is withholding. Of course, the lack of transparency. So, under withholding, the government actually enforced 5% of taxes this year, and they're expecting a 90 billion revenue. I'm just trying to talk fast so I can tell everything. So, and at the same time, the government introduced the personal income tax, which goes on till 36%. But from that component, personal income tax, the government can only earn 100 billion rupees, Shalan. But only by increasing WHT or the withholding tax by 5%, government can raise a similar revenue. I mean, why scraping off the general public or the workforce when you can just increase the withholding tax by 5%? Because the thing is, when you have lower withholding tax rate, people do not tend to file and claim for returns. Right? Withholding is not a final tax. You can always claim it. But when you have, let's say, 15, 18 or 10% withholding out of your interest income, like a sufficient amount or a considerable amount is cut down. So people will tend to definitely file for tax returns. So this is a good way the government can actually raise revenue. And there's a counter narrative for this that's saying that from withholding tax, senior citizens who are actually living on interest rates can get adversely affected. But we give a lot of exemptions for VAT. We give exemptions for other even like earlier for corporate income tax, we had exemptions.
So we can give an exemption there as well.
Exactly, of course. I mean, you can clearly use the NIC, the National Identity Card number, to identify who are senior citizens, and we can exclude them from this withholding tax system. So as I'm just coming back to wrap up to highlight the main problems, that is mainly lack of transparency and lack of governance. If we can fix these while we are doing all these, fulfilling the commitments, successfully, sustainably restructuring the debts, we can of course overcome this crisis. We are still on the initial stages to our recovery. So we have to make sure everything smooths perfectly while we are ticking the boxes.
Thank you very much, Sureni Weerathunge, Senior Research Analyst at Verite Research, for explaining all of these very complicated subject matters, of course, to our viewers in a very succinct manner. Thank you very much to all our viewers for tuning in, as always, to Newsline. Until we meet again, take care and God bless.